Oh, Canada, full of national treasures such as poutine, maple syrup, meese, and animation. In fact, animation is slowly becoming one of Canada's biggest exports, which may be surprising to hear. After all, Canada has an oddly poor reputation to most animation fans here in the United States. People usually think of stuff like Johnny Test or Forget About It, cheap flash animated shows that networks in the US fill their weakest slots with. But I want to lay that to rest, because Canada actually has an incredibly rich animation history that you may not even be aware of. It's just not always found on television, it's found in short films. Animation is kind of a natural place for short films, since even a few minutes of animation is time consuming to make. So the world of animated short films goes way deeper than you think. The short films of Disney and Pixar are really just scratching the surface. Thousands of animated short films are produced independently every year by small teams of animators, financially supported by film festivals, grants, and public funding. And for the past century, one of the strongest forces in the world of animated short films is the National Film Board of Canada, or the NFB for short. Part of the Canadian government itself, the NFB has produced over 130... Wait, no, I had my thumb on the page here. Let me just... Over 13,000 films, with more than 1,000 animated, all publicly funded by Canada. Just to put that into perspective, Disney has produced over 500 animated short films in roughly the same time frame, and they've won thousands of awards for it too, including the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, where they've been nominated 30 times, won 6 of those nominations, and in some of those years they even had 2 films nominated. If you're not familiar with the Academy, they're known for having a pretty heavy bias towards Disney, and the NFB is one of the few producers to consistently challenge them in that category. As an American, the idea that your government just regularly produces beloved animated films that win prestigious awards across the border is insane, right? Because that means all those films are paid for by the Canadian government. The best you'll see out of that in America are propaganda films made during World War II. It just doesn't happen here, animation or not. And I think Canada's dedication to animation is part of why they're slowly taking over the Western animation industry. Don't get me wrong, it's also just straight up cheaper to produce stuff due to massive tax breaks and lower pay compared to US studios. But I also think Canada got there in the first place by funding culture. Canada produces excellent films, they become known for excellent quality, and then that feeds back into their economy. So, I figured the best way to illustrate that is to just talk about a couple of those films. I want to show you why you should care about animation beyond what you see on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, and how Canada got to where they are in the industry by just funding a lot of really good films, such as The Big Snit. Directed by Richard Conde, The Big Snit's about an old married couple playing a game of Scrabble. And that's definitely all it is. I don't want to give away too much because I think it's better going in blind, but it has a really lovely message about how petty arguments can be in the grand scheme of a lifetime with loved ones. And it's also just ungodly funny. The writing and humor has aged so well that I think it would actually fit right in with the modern internet. Like, this dude's favorite show is called Sawing for Teens, and he loves sawing so much that he just can't stop sawing things. It's such an insane concept, I love it. This kind of humor could be on the Eric Andre show, yet this film was made all the way back in the 80s. The whole short has a newspaper comic art style that I think has aged wonderfully. There's this concept in animation called line economy, where you want to design your characters in such a way that they can be drawn and recognizable in only a few lines. And this short has it in spades. It's why you don't tend to see complicated patterns and shapes in cartoons, because the animator would have to redraw all those details every frame. So I always find it really delightful when you can draw a really funny looking character in a couple of well-placed lines, just like the characters in the short. A fast line economy lets them have this boiling outline look, where an animator redraws the same frame several times, so their outlines wiggle when they stand still. It's likely the style influenced shows like Ed, Edd n Eddy, also produced in Canada. All the backgrounds are also just as wiggly as the characters, but have a little more detail and softer shading, making the characters pop and placing them firmly into a very tangible environment. As much as I love traditional animation with detailed, lush backgrounds, it's also nice to see backgrounds that are just as wobbly and silly looking as the characters, rather than idealistic and beautiful. Both backgrounds and characters matching each other helps establish this weird world where sawing for teens and shaking your eyeballs is normal. It's a great film, and one of the best to come out of the NFB, despite how simple it is. And if you live in Canada, you can actually watch it right on their website. But if you live in the United States like me, you'd need to use a VPN, like I did with today's sponsor, Private Internet Access. If there's something you want to watch on Netflix or Hulu that's only available in another country, Private Internet Access VPN can reroute your internet connection so that you're connected in Canada instead, or any of the 91 countries PIA can connect to, including all 50 US states. Without a VPN, you're paying for Netflix only to get blocked from everything they offer in other countries, a bit like paying for the best seats in a movie theater and then getting seated in the hallway. Plus, Private Internet Access hides your connection from anyone looking to mess with it. If you're at the mall or airport and you're connected to free Wi-Fi that anyone can use, PIA keeps your personal data safe by encrypting your connection and hiding your IP address. And this isn't just for one device. You can use PIA on an unlimited number of devices, including your laptop, your computer, your phone, your tablet, anything you want protected and hidden. And if you're wondering, PIA doesn't keep any of your personal data. Everything is open source, and they don't make money by selling your data. They make money by selling a good VPN. I know, what a concept. And you can get 83% off that good VPN by visiting piavpn.com/doodly, or by visiting the link in the description below. That's nearly $2 a month with 4 months free. Thanks again to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. So, you may have noticed earlier that there's nothing obviously Canadian about the Big Snit. You would think that if the government is funding your film, it's because the film is about Canadian history or culture. And they do produce a lot of films like that, especially when they started shortly after World War II. But since then, a lot of the best films that come out of the NFB have nothing at all to do with Canada. Because the goal of the NFB isn't to create Canadian propaganda, it's to cultivate talent within the country and show the rest of the world what that talent can do. It's not about the short term of funding a cute little animated film, it's about the long-term effect that has on Canada's economy. Talented animators aren't created overnight, and they can't work for free. They need funding, and they need stuff to work on that develops their talent and shows it to the world. And sure, as a government, you can sit there and hope corporations in your country will provide funding and jobs for your citizens. You can hope they'll cultivate talent and take risks on new ideas that push culture. Or you can make it happen yourself, show the results to the world, and let them come to you. See what I'm getting at? Public funding gets you excellent films gets you talented animators gets you economic growth, and economic growth gets you public funding. Repeat for 100 years until every American studio has an office in Vancouver. That's funding culture. If you still don't see it though, let's talk about another short film, Madame Tutli-Putli. Content warning for gore and some scary themes in this film. I won't be showing any of that in this video, but just know that if you watch the full film afterwards, which you absolutely should. This is a much more adult stop-motion animated short about a woman with far too many belongings boarding an overnight train, and her experience with several odd passengers. It's got a bit of humor, but most of it is on the creepy side of things. The film has this sort of airy, ghostly atmosphere to it that almost feels like a dream. Strange, unexplained happenings, weird and suspicious characters, and an overall sense that something is wrong. And being stop motion, the materials everything is made with have a lot of wear and tear to them that add to this atmosphere in a way that I really like. Without giving too much away, death and decay are pretty clearly a central theme to the film, as well as not holding on to too many things in your life, both emotionally and literally. So everything being very messy and old and kind of gross looking establishes that feeling really well. Professionally done stop motion in recent years has gotten pretty clean and neat, but I personally like when you can tell what kinds of materials a stop motion film is made of. It gives it a human touch that other mediums can't recreate. By the way, if you're looking at this footage and wondering, wow, those eyes look real, that's because they are. Those are real eyes. They filmed live action footage of an actress acting out the scene in real life, and then isolated the actor's eyes into the stop motion. You would think it would crash headfirst into the uncanny valley, but it actually looks really, really good. It ends up creating this really haunting look to the puppets, and I think brings them to life in a way that I don't think I've ever seen in any other film. And it somehow looks so natural you just don't notice it and forget it's there as you keep watching. For example, the rest of the puppets' faces never move at all for the entirety of the film. Their mouths don't open or make any sort of expression, but because the eyes are real human eyes, the entire face ends up feeling super expressive. It's a technique that probably would only ever work in stop motion, and that makes it kind of a stroke of genius to combine real-life eyes with the only animation medium that uses real-life puppets. And again, I cannot stress this enough, the government of Canada just funded this film. Half of my audience is from the United States, so I know at least half of you can relate to how weird that is as a concept. In case it isn't clear though, the United States has barely any funding for the arts. We have two organizations, the NEH and the NEA. And of course, both organizations are constantly under threat of being cut entirely. Which is weird because both agencies run on a budget of about $200 million each, which is about as much as a single Pixar movie. But here's the thing, the NFB is not the exception. Around the world, publicly funded art is the standard. France invested 17 billion in the arts in 2019. Germany, 14.5 billion euros in 2023. The United States is the weird one here. This isn't intended to uppercut you with politics, it's the whole reason these films are able to exist in the first place. You don't get films with experimental techniques that take 5 years to make like Madame Tutli-Putli. They never get the chance in the first place. Everything has to be profit-driven, motivated by returns on investment. And I think you can see that profit-driven squeeze in the current state of American animation today. When the industry faces tough times and lower budgets, studios turn to countries like Canada because they fund the arts directly. Tax breaks make studios cheaper to run, and public art schools with low tuition create the talented workforce that studios need. And I believe the NFB's films were the start of all of this. Ever since the 1940s, they've been showing what happens when public funding supports animation, and now we're feeling the ripple effect that has on the animation industry today. I kept this video to just two of the safest, most accessible films from the board because I didn't want this to be a history lesson, but I could have just as easily talked about the work of Norman McLaren, the founder of the NFB's animation unit. In 1949, he released Begone Dull Care, which abstractly interpreted jazz music by drawing directly on film. Then a few years later, he released Neighbors, using real people as stop-motion puppets. Animators just weren't doing stuff like that in the 1950s. The NFB produced Ryan Larking's Walking in 1968, and then 36 years later, they produced Ryan, a film about his difficult life and struggle with addiction after his initial success at the NFB. They even produced one of the earliest computer animated films with Hunger in 1974. But even if I stick to fairly safe and accessible films, I could have talked about The Cat Came Back, or I Like Girls, or Animal Behavior. I could have shown Blind Vatia, Affairs of the Art, Turbine, Blackfly. I even had a section in my scripts on Village of Idiots, one of the direct inspirations for a short film I have uploaded on this channel, but I cut it for time, because there's simply too much to talk about. I know all this seems pretty obvious to anyone who lives in Canada, but the unfortunate reality is that a lot of discussion about Canadian animation online focuses solely on the cheapest, worst stuff that airs on television, since that's often what gets aired in the United States. I couldn't find a single video on YouTube that talks about anything the NFB has produced. No reviews, no analysis, no recommendations, nothing from the major animation commentary channels. And I think that's really unfortunate. The fact of the matter is, if you consider yourself a fan of animation, you owe it to yourself to watch not only the NFB's shorts, but more short films in general, films from outside the United States. You need to expose yourself to new perspectives, new art styles outside your comfort zone, stories that don't have a sequel and aren't part of a franchise. Not just what corporations package and sell to you, but films directly from an artist's experience and perspective, free from executives and lawyers. There's nothing inherently wrong with animation made that way, but it's limited because they'll always want to make their money back. That's what the NFB is about. That's what public funding of the arts is about. It maintains that network of excellent talent for excellent films, experimenting even when corporations can't. And that leads to consistent employment, a better economy, a better culture, and recognition around the world, evidenced by how almost every film I mentioned today has an Oscar nomination. And all of that for a sliver of a nation's budget. So I hope you can check out these films and more. You can find links to every film mentioned in this video in the description, plus lots of other recommendations. And hey, they're all short, so watch them while you eat lunch or something. I hope you come away with this video with a greater respect for short films and the support they need to happen. Thanks for watching.